Hello everybody, my name is Filippo Lorenzin and I am the Artistic Director of MoCDA, the Museum of Contemporary Digital Art. Thank you for coming to the opening event of Connectome, a group show curated by Chanel Verdult featuring Arthur Baron, Connie Bakshi, Enes, Evelyn Bencicova, Klahr, Sasha, Stiles, Synthtati, Tabitha, Swanson, and ZEITWEITZ. Connectome is the very first collection of the Foundry curated by a guest curator. For those of you who may not know what it is, the Foundry is MoCDA's virtual art residencies that started back in February 2022. Every month, the Foundry hosts art residencies culminating in curated collection drops, along with the works being displayed in metaverse gallery shows. I want to thank Chanel and all the artists involved. Of course, MoCDA is very grateful to the Decentraland community for their great support. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Chanel. Chanel is the head of curation at Unicorn DAO and one of the core creative directors behind NFT Art Berlin. She has curated crypto art exhibitions, created art galleries, and hosted live performances at Art Dubai Digital, the Venice Biennale, SX, SW, NFT New York, NFT LA, Miami Art Basel, among many, many, many others. Her passions lie on the brink of art, performance, and technology, collaborating with and seeking provocative visionaries who find all mediums boundless. Welcome, Chanel.
Ciao, Filippo.
How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me today.
No, thank you for being here with me. I'm very looking forward to this opening event. Chanel, can you explain what is Connectome? What is this collection and exhibition about?
Connectome is a collection of artworks that I curated for the Foundry Museum of Contemporary Digital Art. It's curatorial residency featuring Sasha, Stiles, Enes, Tabitha, Swanson, ZEITWEITZ, Evelyn, Bencicova, Synthtati, Arthur Baron, and Klahr. We enter each artist's inner mechanisms, their current states of practice, process, and output, composed through multidisciplinary translations of identity, cerebral symbolism, dream state, subconscious, and conscious world building, as each reflects one's own personal psyche. Connectome aims to explore the intimate territories of both physical and digital interconnectedness.
That's very interesting. Now, I will leave the stage to you. I know that most of the artists featured in this exhibition are ready to join you on the stage. So enjoy.
Thank you so much. So we started out perhaps with Evelyn.
Hello. Hello. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Evelyn.
Hello, Lucy.
So let's invite your collaborators on stage as well, Tati and Arthur.
Hello. Hello.
We're in the metaverse. So Evelyn, Tati, and Arthur, starting with Evelyn, I actually curated your work for Unicorn DAO, and that's how I got to know all of your friends. I've always been an admirer of your work, as it's extremely emotional with qualities of this type of afterlife quality where I find myself completely enveloped in your world building. And this is actually the first time I felt like you went for something quite different, which is refreshing. Can you tell us what inspired you all to change things up collaborating with Tati and Arthur?
Can I start?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, as I was already mentioning to you in our Twitter call or talk, and now so happy to have like Tati and Arthur here as well because they were on travels. I think it was like connection of all of us, which is also like friendly connection, inspiring each other, but finally coming to work together on something and connect our different inspiration, influences, vibes, and so on. So I think this is the reason why this work is so refreshing and kind of also very new for me. And as I was already speaking the last time, with Tati, we know each other for quite a long time, and we always had this like love and fascination for objects, collecting them and thinking of each other when seeing object which reminded us of the other person. And in this work in particular, as I was telling last time, during COVID time, we just decided to join our objects, join our world, let them meet, and just play. So it's very playful work, I feel. And the process of creating it was the same. So sometimes we would just like find things in the flat, put them together, and we created this like field of experimentation out of this lack of possibilities in this time. And it was, I think that's really visible. And then Arthur joining us later in the similar way, kind of collecting things again from this atmosphere of what we have around us, what we have at home, what we are experiencing or like perceiving on a daily basis, and then putting it in this creative mixture. So I feel like it's connection of all of us which makes this work unique. And yeah, I don't know, this is from me, but I would have also give space to Tati and Arthur to also
Super
say more.
lovely. And if I can ask also Tati and Arthur what your backgrounds are, because I know they're multidisciplinary and how that correlates with this artistic trio.
Well, it's the first time we are doing this trio situation, but normally I come from a like visual arts background. I actually began studying like fashion and illustration when I was living in London, and my move to Berlin kind of manifested completely new chapter because I realized that all the fashion was pretty much shallow and I didn't want to be involved into it, although I was working for quite some time on like film projects and yeah, still was like a bit fashion related, but I was thinking of finding a new path, and that was quite long and I would say sometimes even a painful journey, starting from the zero and just trying to find things that I embrace visually, and then I start to have this like obsession with collecting objects, just trying to find my aesthetic through the objects that I like find on the streets, or like I started to have a religion of going to flea market every Sunday and just like forcing myself of like finding fragments that would then represent my world, visual world, that kind of started to be evolving all together. And with Evelyn, it's been always deep friendship and deep support chain. And I would say I always looked up to her, and obviously really, really wanted to finally make some project that is more like personal and it's purely incorporating our both aesthetics rather than, have a brief from a client, which of course we work before on a different projects, just commission projects. But yeah, since COVID time gave us so much like opportunity to just be still and have deep conversations and discussions, we just decided to make it like I don't know, it was like bi-weekly basis, I would say.
It was like our art therapy, we called it, because we would really just like meet. But even to what Tati was saying, all of your like way of finding yourself, which I think we all creative people experience, that for you this like collecting of objects, like if you would see Tati's flat, it's actually in the background, but like there is a very interesting 360 for sure. Her whole flat looks like amazing installation full of lights and objects, and like in this creative search I always thought like you are doing it already. Like it's like everywhere around you. And even in these works it was so normally they are not just digital, it was real worlds, so it's kind of like building from objects or like using different lights, foils, etc. Then photographing them, filming them, Tati animating them, and then Arthur building like sound composition for it.
Yeah. Also, Arthur's process was
Yeah.
pretty much like collecting bases. I'll let you speak.
For me, it's like so. My background is like I'm a musician. Like I started to play instruments quite early on, and I was like in conservatory until like I was 18 years old, and feeding interest for music in different ways, and like collecting music already quite a lot. And I started some art studies in France, and quite quickly decided to actually move to Berlin to pursue my passion for music and feeding it in different ways. And like I've been like researching and collecting a lot of soundscapes and any kind of music. And at some point I decided also from like actively listening to my environment like all the time, I decided to also like start to record my environment. And then I would say, then later on when I met Tati, then I got really inspired also by visual works.
Yeah, I always needed sounds for my visuals.
And so she kind of strongly suggested that we start working together, and like I do sound that would like emphasize like a visual content. And so like the way I did sound for this piece, it's like, it's a mix of like recordings from what's around us in the flat, and then it's also like trying to recreate those sounds with like a software, like a DAW, and and then just try to merge them together a little bit like Tati's image, where it's like a mix of like computer glitches and recorded image that actually exists.
Some of it was field recordings also. For example, the water that we were hearing in the coast.
Yeah.
And I think this
we connect analog and digital and like merge it together.
And glitch it in between.
Yeah, I had a feeling that it was a field recording, and you all did such a great job of emulating the different types of qualities, natural qualities of liquid glitch-like textures of what you hear and feel and see. And so thank you so much for joining us today. It's really beautiful to see you all online, and I will see you in Berlin.
Yes, looking forward.
And thank you for making us part of it. It's really a pleasure. And
My
it looks
pleasure.
great.
You were on the top of my list, and it's such an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you.
Ciao, everyone.
Ciao.
So, Enes.
Hello.
You're next.
And a few.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. We're going to go to your work next, the Burial of Past Identities.
Oh, I see it.
So what's beautiful about your piece is that I think that we can all existentially relate to the multiple lives we live through. Which lives did you bury within yourself, and what's to come? Can you tell us a bit of the intimate meaning behind this work?
Well, basically the whole idea came from, as I also mentioned on the Twitter space talk, the therapy I was kind of doing by myself, which is called family parts therapy, I believe. And basically it's about just getting to know different parts of yourself and somehow categorize them in a way that makes you see the balance in between. So basically you would be kind of be like, oh, this part of myself which I don't recognize so much or suppress, that needs to be uplifted by the others being too powerful or taking over too much of the whole space. So the whole idea is connected to that, and it comes from that. And I think recently I've been experiencing a bit of a big change in my life, which made me look through a lot of like these parts and recognize them in ways that I didn't before, and I saw them as things that I need to leave behind. in a way, but you know, in a midpoint, the transition point in between of just like letting go of some parts and looking at the future and everything. I think I found myself a little bit too connected to them still, even though I wanted to let go. It almost made me feel like I was connected to them so much that they were actually just dragging me down all these years. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I would like to give like specific parts, but it's my beliefs or views or perspectives that I had, and with the experiences I had over the years, that they changed, evolved, and developed. So I guess they represent like those parts that I don't feel connected to anymore, but they're still in me somehow that I just need to let go. And I think this work was the realization of that, and maybe the first step of just like seeing them as things to release, and maybe in the stages of those releasing points, that maybe this was the first one that I kind of felt like I'm still too connected to them, and maybe they're just like, you know, dragging me with them, basically.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So
Of
yeah, I
course.
mean, I also like put all the, you know, like I also wanted to like do it in a way that it has a bit of like a helplessness, that you're like looking at it from all different sides. You're trying to like figure out something, but there's also a bit of like a calmness of it, than just like letting go of just like, you know, being burned in the middle. So I guess it's just like that, the mood I was in, to be honest.
It's a very complex mood to be in.
Yeah, maybe sometimes.
I wouldn't expect any less.
Me as well. Yeah, maybe it is a bit too complex, but I don't know.
Nothing is too complex, like Evelyn said. We absolutely love this work, and it's extremely emotional. I think that everyone can relate to it in some way, because we go through so many different transitions in life.
Exactly.
You've had such a visceral way of explaining it, you know, through just an animation, which really moves us. So thank you so much, Enes. It was really a pleasure to have you
having me in the exhibition. I'm also very happy to be amongst my very close friends, and also under the curation of yours, obviously. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Hi, Connie.
Hey, Chanel. How are you?
Good. How are you today? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, doing well. It's a rainy day in Georgia, so I'm enjoying my cup of coffee and trying to stay warm.
Coffee, AI, and tech lore.
Mm-hmm. That's what drives me.
Yes, exactly. So, Connie, your work is also like no other in AI. It has a sophisticated underlying theme that really permeates through each work I've had the pleasure of experiencing, as well as the viewer. Can you tell us a bit about the diptych in virtue of, and how it correlates to your everyday practices in this tech lore world that you've built?
Yeah, I think to give you a little bit of background, by virtue of really just comes out of this language-based process with a guided diffusion model. But it really also comes out of this recollection of my time as a biomedical engineer, where I was playing this algorithmic imitation game. And I spent a lot of time coding models that would simulate real-world scenarios and systems to test new tech and how they would interface with biological systems. By virtue of, I'm looking at this idea of the boundary value, I guess it's the boundary value condition, which is the heart of these simulation models. And it's really, I don't mean to get too like esoteric into the mathematics of it, but bear with me. It's
Please do.
The boundary,
That's what we're here for.
What's that?
That's what we're here for. So please do.
Awesome. So the boundary value problem and conditions, there's a set of differential equations where you're really considering the different constraints and dynamics at play within a very contained system. And really, the success of your simulation model or your algorithm depends entirely on the constituents of the system that you've defined, also known as the boundary conditions. And in my experience, the failure of these algorithms rarely comes from the code itself, but more from an exclusion of the elements of the system that you've failed to account for. So I think kind of zooming out into a larger view of my practice, a lot of what I do is really looking at the things that are unsaid and unseen, the invisible forces and the powers that affect us. And usually I do that through language in particular. But I think when you look at my work, you talk about it being unique, which I really appreciate. But I'm constantly looking at this interface between not only ourselves and the technologies that kind of live behind us invisibly, but also how they start to define the relationships between us.
Stunning. And as a diptych, what was a bit of your process in working with the AI interchangeably to make it, you know, these works, I think what you've achieved, they don't look like the average AI that we're seeing so much of. And I think that as we onboard more people into the open AI world, we'll start to see, you know, more and more of these similar qualities. How do you work with yourself and the AI to refine this type of process?
I try to look at my process as more of a feedback loop, a constant feedback loop, as opposed to an input-output. And to create a singular piece, I might go through, you know, I start with an initial image set that I've created from scratch. And, you know, my art practice is actually based heavily in the material. You know, I actually come from an experiential design background where materiality and physical structure and physics come quite a bit into play. But when I'm creating these initial image sets, I'm constantly pulling from my catalog of images that I've collected around texture and organic surfaces. And then when I pull them into AI, then I eventually start sculpting them using text and affecting the data parameters in the code itself. And I think that's what may kind of lend itself to a specific aesthetic quality. And then within, you know, once I've kind of have my initial base image, I'll go through, which is essentially, that's my little one. You want to come over and say hi, baby? No. All right, give me a second. Okay?
The artist is present.
Yes, the true artist is present.
Hello. Oh, you're so adorable.
This is Bodhi.
Hi, Bodhi. You're the co-creator.
He is the co-creator. But so my process when I'm working with an image synthesis model, specifically within guided diffusion, I'm going through a process of recursion where I'm between every iteration, I'm changing images and I'm changing, images build on subsequent image sets and Mommy, go through maybe.
What's that two boys?
That's called an avatar, baby. But going through recursion where I'm actually changing text prompts and data sets between iterations, and I'll go through maybe anywhere from 500 to over 1,000 iterations to create a singular image.
Wow. Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Connie, and it's so nice to meet you, Bodhi.
Thank you so much for bearing with us. Yikes, this one's a little feisty today. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be in the show.
Our pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, ciao for now.
Bye.
Hi, Chanel.
Hi, ZEITWEITZ. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Live from LA in the metaverse.
Yes. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Filippo, and your whole team for putting all this together, and all the artists. I'm really honored to show with all of you. Really big fan of all your work.
Of course, and massive thank you to the Museum of Contemporary Digital Art for making this happen. A special shout out to Filippo and Serena. We are in front of no past, no future. And I can clearly feel and see parallel universes of the past and future through your work simultaneously. How did you arrive at enhancing your practice of wet plate photography with AI? And how could you potentially onboard others into being not afraid of AI as a medium? Like, what have the benefits of breaking your artistic boundaries and glass ceiling been?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I started as like a very analog person. I do wet plate photography, which is one of the earliest forms of photography from the 1850s. It's all chemical in the darkroom, very much like you would see in a movie with a camera with the accordion, bellows, and the sheet over your head. So it's a very analog process. And my mind was very much in that space. I also make sculptures with blowtorches, so like my whole process of everything I do is very, very analog. But the thing that connects the two is when you work so analog, a lot of that information is lost, so it becomes a very experimental process. And when I first like came upon AI and a lot of like other digital uses, like even like NFTs, it became very experimental because there's not a lot of information. You know, you're building as you go, and it's a very experimental process. So I think the idea of experimentation for me is really fun. It's play in a sense. You know, there's this idea of like you're going to screw up and you're going to fail and you're going to keep going and trying new things. And that is what's exciting to me about it. That element of play and experimentation. On a conceptual level, I also really like the idea of the deep past and the far future. I think of time as being cyclical. And when you go so far into the past, it looks quite futuristic. And the same thing about, you know, the future. Like you look at sci-fi films and things like that, and they look very indigenous and native in a way. So yeah, the idea of kind of reaching towards those two ends of the spectrum and seeing what those connections are. And I think that we're in a place in time right now where we do have a connection to the past, but our world is changing so fast that, you know, technology and the internet is undoubtedly our future. We have one foot in that as well. So that's where this peace, no past, no future comes from. As far as fear around AI, there is a lot of fear around AI, and maybe rightly so. I think it's equally as exciting as it is terrifying. But for me, I want to learn about it. I want to understand how it works. I want to communicate with it. And I also think that there's a lot of parallels between the invention of photography and AI. You know, what back in the day when photography came around, a lot of people had fear around that as well. I'm sure painters at that time probably thought they were going to lose their job, or, you know, there's this idea that photography would steal your soul. And I don't disagree with that. I think it does in some way. I think we like willingly give a little bit of ourselves to it. And there's a lot of the same fears around AI right now. And I think that in understanding the history of photography in the past and how I guess that happened on a slower basis. I mean, the speed that AI is coming at us is so fast that can be really intimidating. But I mean, for me, I just think like I want artists to have these tools in their possession and to be able to use them and to be able to amplify their own practice.
Beautiful. I really like how you just have a really fluid way of onboarding people into AI and the potential that you can untap through your physical historical practices and what is coming for the future. So thank you so much for joining us, and it's such an honor to have you in the show, as
Yeah, thank you for having
always.
me.
Hi, Chanel. Hey, Chanel, can you hear me?
Hi, Sasha.
Hi, how are you?
Good. It's incredible to have you today. Thank you for joining us. Last but certainly not least, we have Sasha Stiles. As you may know, you inspired me after reading your book, Technology, to title the exhibition Connectome as our minds deeply inspire to connect the dots curatorially. Just to give everyone a bit of her background, before I further explain, her book plays on the dynamic between human machine collaboration using natural processing and generative text as prosthetic imagination, also known as the author with her alter ego, an AI poet powered by deep learning language models trained on Stiles poetry. Sasha, can you tell us a bit about your background, the discovery as AI as your alter ego, and the process behind being one of the first AI poets starting a new movement?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you so much for including me in this amazing show and for the great chat today, and also thank you to MoCDA and to Filippo. It's been really lovely as ever to work with the team on this. So feel very grateful. It's really cool to see the avatar there running through all these artworks. Definitely feels very appropriate for this particular collection and this particular set of poems. So yeah, as you mentioned in your really kind introduction, yes, I'm a poet who does a lot of work with text and technology in different ways, and that kind of ranges from playing with various digital tools to write and to publish poetry, and also using tools that are powered by artificial intelligence and large language models in order to actually shape language and sort of help act as a co-author. So I've been sort of, thinking about technology for a really long time, pretty much, since I was a kid, and writing about technology in different ways and kind of thinking about my connection to the machines that I use, that we use, thinking about my relationship to technology as a whole, and kind of, thinking about what our new technologies pretend for the human condition. And I'd been writing about these things and sort of reflecting on them in more of a traditional poetic sense for most of my writing career up until about 7 years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, started to really incorporate more of these digital tools directly in my work, and started really making video poems and animations, sort of a precursor to the kind of thing that that's in this show, but also began really getting interested in generative text. So I was actually clocking what some really interesting experimental writers were doing using computers to write poetry in different ways, and even sort of thinking back to generative poetry and computational poetics dating back like even much further, long before the advent of AI, thinking about poets who were using algorithms to write automated poetry in the 1950s and 60s and things like that. And I kind of wanted to experiment with similar approaches. And I began researching and reading a lot about natural language processing, which is an area of AI that combines aspects of linguistics and machine learning, and really is all about ingesting lots of human speech as training examples, and then using algorithms to synthesize all that data and actually write texts that sound as though they were written by a human, but really were written by a non-human mind. And I've been really invested in what I as a poet can learn about my own process of writing and creativity and inspiration from kind of seeing it happen in a non-human mind, from being able to interact with, a quote unquote artificial intelligence, seeing what I can learn from the processes and from the collaborative experience. It's been really, I think, invaluable for me as a writer to understand that there are actually a lot of similarities between the way that my human mind works and the way that these intelligent systems piece together information and incorporate new bits of data, and kind of how the sparks fly and create something that we would probably refer to as inspiration. So that's really been kind of a driving force of a lot of the work that I'm doing, poetically speaking. And yeah, I was really so thrilled when you invited me to be part of this curation. And this theme is, of course, very near and dear to my heart. Both the idea of the connectome, which, as you mentioned, is something that I touch on in my book, Technology, both in the sense of the connectome as, part of the human brain, a part of the way that the nervous system, works, it functions, but also in the idea of the connectome that we're all kind of creating through Web3 is this, diverse collective consciousness and minds that are connected around the world, and really linking together and creating new things that have never existed before. So really feels special to be part of this show. And really happy to be able to contribute some AI poetry to it.
Absolutely incredible. And can you also give us a bit of a background of the diptych's relationship to how you created both for this show?
Yeah, absolutely. So both of these pieces are actually from an ongoing series called Repeti. And it's a series that kind of looks at the similarities, or maybe the overlaps, between poetic repetition and generative art. And I think, a lot of poetry is really driven by repetition in different ways. It's driven by the idea of, repeated sounds and similar words or phrases being used again and again, but in slightly different ways. I'm really interested in the use of a poetic device called litany, which is basically where you kind of create lists that use similar words or phrases over and over again. And there's something about the accumulation of those sounds and of those words that does something like very profound, I think. And so, there's a reason why poets, I think, really reach for repetition over and over again as a really core part of practice. And I've been thinking a lot as I've been working in the generative text space, and also, working a lot with generative artists, and really kind of looking around and admiring what a lot of generative coders are creating, visually speaking. I've been thinking a lot about the similarities between what poets do in creating these kind of repetitive structures that convey something through a deliberate recurrence or recursion, and what generative artists are doing when they create an algorithm that is designed to run over and over again and elicit, a slightly different emotion, or evoke something a little different each time, and create a different visual output each time. So this whole series, and these two pieces in particular, are kind of an outgrowth of that initial query about, what poets and generative artists might have in common. And they both take a line of poetry and kind of explore it through visual repetition, but they both play in different ways on more of a literal poetic repetition as well. The piece on the left, Are You Ready for the Future, is from a long poem that's actually in my book Technology, that basically is a poem cycle created by asking my AI alter ego this question, are you ready for the future, over and over and over again, like hundreds of times, and then pouring through the responses and curating my favorite responses into a poem cycle. So there's a real connection there between the idea of repetition and looking at kind of the way that the same question asked of a non-human entity can result in so many different and very evocative human-esque responses. And then the piece on the right, Connectome, Connect to Me is a play on the word connectome that actually appears also in my book. And I was thinking about the word connectome, writing a poem about neuroscience and gray matter in the brain, and the idea of the connectome as the brain's wiring diagram. And it occurred to me that the word was so close to another word that we've been thinking a lot about, in relationship to technology, which is connection. Connect to Me is right there in the word as well. And so that became part of the poem that this piece is based on, and then kind of gave rise to this wordplay and this visual piece where you see both Connect to Me and Connectome repeating over and over and over again, and kind of becoming one and the same, and then sort of teasing apart their differences as well.
Incredible. And if I may ask, do we have the honors of, if perhaps you have technology close to you, to hear an excerpt from your book to close out the show?
Oh, that's so nice of you to ask. Sure, I have a copy right here. Actually, I could read the section.
Perfect.
Actually, that's about the connectome, if you'd like. It's very short.
I'd love to.
Thanks for asking, Chanel. That's really sweet. I'll just read this one stanza, and it's from a long poem called Ghost in the Machine, which I guess in a nutshell is kind of about the history of philosophical inquiry into the difference between the mind and the body, and then kind of thinking about that in relationship to the analog and digital divide that we are grappling with today. So it's a poem about digital duality, really. And this is section 8. The connectome is the brain's wiring diagram, complex map of a nervous system. From here, it looks like art, white matter rendered in RGB. I trust this view of something I can't see. I think that's called faith. Connect to me. I hope these pathways stay fresh and linked for a lifetime, that synapses don't snap whatever tethers memory. I think that's what I came here for. Cogito ergo something. So that's just stanza 8 from a long poem, but I'll stop there and say thank you again for having me, and congratulations to all the artists for all the beautiful work.
What a way to close this show. Thank you so much, Sasha, for joining us today and sharing such an incredible diptych as a part of the online exhibition. Thank you, everyone, today for tuning in. All of these artists are on object.com. This is the series called Connectome, and we encourage you to check everyone out on social media as well as the Foundry. And lastly, we have Filippo, who can give us further details.
Well, thank you, Chanel, and thank you to all the artists for this amazing opening event. Of course, just to let you know, this exhibition opened just today, Tuesday, November the 15th. So please come to the Decentraland and visit the exhibition by yourself. And actually, if you're planning to come, to see it, maybe with some guests or some friends, please get in touch with MoCDA, and there will always be somebody from our team that may book some time off to take you for a tour. One last thing, please don't forget to follow MoCDA on Twitter and Instagram to learn about our future projects, because it's true that 2022 is almost ending, but we still have many things to present in the coming weeks, including, of course, the next Foundry collections and exhibitions, and much more. Thank you, Chanel, again, and see you all very soon. Maybe in the metaverse, maybe IRL. Who knows? See you soon. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight or this morning, depending where you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.